Alright. This is going to be the second half of the general info section on the RTABC tutorial series I'm making. First part should be in the description. First one was more about, movement, info about the challenge, stuff like that. This one's going to be more about, tricks, cloning, HOLP shenanigans, VSC, Star Dance Flip, fun stuff like that. The stuff that makes the A button challenge the A button challenge. So I'm just going to get into it. First thing I'm going to point out that's going to be really useful for doing a lot of these tricks is STROOP. Yeah, so STROOP, I forget what I think it's Super Mario 64 Technical Runtime Object Observer Program, or something like that. Second half, it's probably not. But yeah, it's basically memory watts, just sort of absolutely massively in depth. It has a ton of stuff that you can edit, like you got Mario, got a bunch of objects, and yeah, you can just see all the variables relevant to them. I'm using a particularly old version of STROOP because, okay, so in the description I'm going to link sort of a modern, like the up-to-date version of STROOP, but that version only really works on Mupen, at least the last version of Mupen the last version of STROOP I tried didn't work with Project 64, so I'm also going to link a version, which is the one I'm using, which is kind of out of date, but it works with Project 64. You can only use it on emulator, so sorry if you are on WiiDC or N64 or something. Yeah, this really helps. It's good for a lot of things. It has the file, so if you want to, like this is the file I'm on, you could change stuff with the file if you want. You could change like coins and health. You could change Mario's position. You could check the HOLP. You could see Mario's speed values. You could do it for a bunch of objects, like for example, there's these buttons on the left. Let me just show it off real quick. If we want to just make Mario like absolutely high in the air, I go to the Mario tab, increase his Y position. There you go. If I see an object that I want, like, hey, there's this 1-up over here. Can I just, like, have it? It's here. Bob-ombs. Just, like, give me all of the Bob-ombs I want. But it's good for just messing around and for a lot of tricks, especially if you're trying to, like, develop new tricks. It can be extraordinarily useful. But it's also good for, checking it out yourselves and see if you're doing anything wrong, particularly with HOLP stuff. It's going to become relevant. Alright, so first thing I'm going to talk about is by far the biggest one, which is about cloning. So the point of cloning is basically it's a glitch which lets Mario hold and throw and drop objects which he's not really intended to be able to hold. So I'm going to focus on the case where you're doing it with a Bob-omb. There are a few other ways to do it. So, as far as I'm aware, and I could be wrong about this, all of cloning with the Bob-omb works, and a lot of other broken mechanics with Mario grabbing items works because there's a gap when Mario tries to punch and grab something between the game saying, yes, you could pick this item up, and the game like actually putting the item in Mario's hand. So for example, I have this bomb right here. I can pick it up. Well, I messed it up there. I gotta wait a little bit for the Bob-omb to be blowing up. So I need get good timing. Okay, this should be good. Yeah, there it is. Okay. So you can see here that, like, the bomb is mid-explosion, but the bomb is still there. So if I punch grab, let me try and get a freeze frame. So I'm grabbing the Bob-omb. The bomb currently isn't there anymore. Like, it's blown up. But the game still had, like, a flag set that said Mario is picking up the Bob-omb. and it didn't cancel it. Oh crap, it didn't work there. Give me a second. Okay, there you go. Yeah, so right now, Mario isn't holding the Bob-omb. He's holding the slot in memory where the Bob-omb used to be. So, like, for example, if I walk away, that bomb that I grabbed just respawns there. And yeah, so I'm just holding like a slot in memory where objects can load into. It's called an object slot. I think there's like, at max, like a bit over 200 that can be used, but most of the time there's only like 100 or so actually in the level. Yeah, as you walk around, you create objects like dust on the floor. You load different objects like coins or Goombas. You can get different objects to load into what Mario's holding. Because normally there's a thing where Mario's grabbing the bomb, and the bomb like won't unload because Mario's holding onto it. But because Mario isn't holding that, the game doesn't like make sure that he's actually holding an object. So let me try and get one of these coins to show up. Yeah, there you go. So I've got one of the coins. This coin is one of these lines of 5. In addition to loading into the course, one of them loaded into the object slot that Mario is flagged as holding. So, for example, if I throw it, I can pick up the coin right here, and the original coin disappears, because I effectively moved the object to be where Mario threw it, and yeah, I could pick it up. So there's a few things that happen with this. One, you'll notice that when you interact with the object or do anything with it, it stays here. Like the graphic stays there. That'll be the same for other objects like Goombas and stars and like that. But at least for the case of coins, cloning is useful, and this is the case where it's actually called cloning, where the act of throwing the bomb like this sort of breaks throwing the coin like this. The act of throwing it and using the clone sort of breaks the connection between the coin and the thing that spawns the coins. So, for example, if I leave and come back, the coin that I just threw here respawns because the coin never really told the thing that spawns the coins that it has in fact been collected. So if you reload the area, the coin's back, and you could pick up the original again, and yeah. This is why it's called cloning, because for coins and Goombas and stuff, it allows you to, you know, for Goombas that come in like a trio of 3, like these 3 Goombas, it allows you to duplicate them, but that's not really what... Really, it's just letting you hold an object that you're not supposed to, and for objects like that are handled by a spawner, like coins and Goombas, yeah, it tends to have this effect of duplicating. Yeah, it's really useful because Goombas, you can place them around the map and then bounce on them. You know, coins, you can duplicate them for levels where you want coins. Like, the easiest strat to do BOB 100 is to just clone a singular coin like that and then get the 99 other coins that you don't need to go on the island for. It's useful, it's used for Rainbow Ride 100 coins. Yeah, clones are useful in other levels, like SSL. BOB is a really big one where clones are useful. Dire Docks, Quick Race Through Downtown, and Wet Dry World. Yeah, it's a pretty useful technique. And one that's particularly useful is stars, because if you clone a star, you can actually just straight up collect it. Like, it perfectly works as if you just clone the star, because all you really did there is move the star. But yeah, things to note about clones. The main one is sort of like it's called the one use rule, I think, is that, so you note that I threw the coin, I can't collect it anymore. Like, it's visually going to be there, and I don't really have a way of getting rid of it, in this course at least. But yeah, that coin will always be there because I think it's because the thing that actually handles unloading the coin also breaks when it's, like, away from the spawner or something. I don't really know. Yeah. Yeah, you can't collect coins more than once. If you clone a Goomba, you can't jump on the Goomba more than once. The only real exception to that I'm aware of is if you clone a pole in Dire Docks, you actually can keep using the pole over and over again. I think it's because Mario using the pole doesn't actually do anything to the pole. Like, it doesn't, like, collect the coin or stomp on the Goomba or anything like that. Like, I think it's because the pole just remains unchanged. But yeah. That's sort of the general concept behind cloning. Yeah. Talk about a few ways of doing it. When you're doing it with a Bob-omb, I'll try and show you in detail how it works. So, it's easiest to do if you could pick up the Bob-omb, although there's reasons. In the HOLP section, I'll try and show why being able to hold the Bob-omb isn't super useful a lot of the time. But yeah, it's easiest to do once just by holding the Bob-omb. The setup I use for this is you really want to pause buffer it, because it's like I don't know how big the window is. I think it's like 3-4 frames or something. You have to press B to actually pick up the bomb. So yeah, the timing I use for it is you pause buffer pretty quickly until you see the bomb hit the ground, and then you want to press B not as soon as you see the bomb on the ground, but just like a couple frames after. So like here, I would unpause and then delay pressing B for like just a little bit of time. So like, okay, that was a little bit too much of a delay. There you go. And that grabs the bomb. Another thing to note, if you are doing it with bombs, you need to be doing it... Hold on, I'll demonstrate on the other one. Up here. So, if you just like have the bomb just on flat ground and you try to do this, then what's going to happen is... Drop on the floor, come on. Yeah, that would have cloned, but the problem is, since I'm on the same level as the bomb elevation-wise, I got hit by the bomb's explosion. And Mario getting hit by because the explosion still happens, even though you're like grabbing the bomb post-explosion. So that ruins Mario. It makes him drop the bomb, I believe. Two ways to avoid that in the Bob-omb case are to do it on a slope. And the slope doesn't need to be super steep. Like, this is a really... Okay, well, that time I didn't do it. But you could see I didn't get damaged by the explosion. So, yeah. Even, like, an extremely shallow slope is enough to make it not happen. The other one, which I think is less common but works, like, just as well, is... You hold the Bob-omb just off of an edge, and when you hold the Bob-omb just off the edge, the Bob-omb is able to spawn in the air off of the floor, and that way he'll be a little bit below Mario, and you could grab him without getting hit by the explosion either. But yeah. The main way to clone is by using Bob-ombs. Second way to clone that's pretty common is for levels like Wet Dry World and... Hey, I got a Goomba, nice. Gonna use that for later. For levels like Wet Dry World and Dire Docks, there's no bombs in there, but you can clone because both of those levels have a loading point within them. In Dire Docks, it's in the tunnel between the two halves of the level, and in Wet Dry World, it's in the tunnel between downtown and everything else. Going through that zone basically unloads all of the objects in one half and loads all the objects in the other half. So, if you manage to hold an object between the two halves, and it's kind of hard to do without glitches because they like knew this could happen and didn't want you to be able to carry any objects between them. But you can do it. And yeah, because that unloads and loads everything between the two halves, that can cause the object you're holding to change as you swim back and forth between the two halves. And because swimming creates a lot of particles with bubbles and the stuff at the surface, you can basically just swim back and forth over and over again until you can't use it. Until you get whatever object you want, usually a star. Yeah, for reference, Goomba, you can see I place a Goomba. You could bounce on the Goomba, but you can only do it once. Like, I can't do it another time, even though the Goomba will still be here. Showing off the one use rule. Goombas, it's a little bit difficult, because if you'll see, if I just throw the Goomba, what happens is I'll get hit by the Goomba, because Mario and the Goomba are sort of so close together. And that means I actually can't use the Goomba to bounce on. Like, it's just not... I get hit with it once, so I can't use it again. One way to get around it, which I don't think is actually used anywhere, is if you go the Goomba on the slight slope and sort of belly slide down and do a rollout, you can actually release the Goomba far enough away. But there's a much more common way to make sure you don't interact with the Goomba, and I'm going to talk about it in the HOLP section, which I think is actually... I think that's everything in the cloning section I want to talk about. Next section, which is very closely tied with cloning and actually is, in some sense, more powerful, I think, is sort of abusing the HOLP. So the HOLP, it's an acronym. It stands for the held object's last position. And it has to do with the actual process the game uses when Mario throws and is holding an object. So, for example, if I pick up this cork box, what you might think is happening is that, okay, the game is just taking the cork box and is constantly rendering it in front of Mario. But doing this for a lot of objects would cause Mario to just, like, constantly just, like, get pushed by the object. And it would be kind of weird to constantly update the object. So what the game actually does when Mario is holding something is that Mario right now is not holding... The thing that is in front of Mario is not the box. The box is, in fact, never actually moved. It's right here, still. The game just makes it invisible and intangible, so you can't really interact with it. The thing in front of Mario is just a graphic, which looks like the box, and is just sort of placed... Okay, well now the box is physical. Like, whenever Mario throws or drops the box, it just moves the box to in front of Mario. But it doesn't move the box directly to in front of Mario. What it actually does is there's a position the game keeps track of, called the held object's last position, abbreviated as HOLP, that's just sort of constantly being updated in front of Mario. Whenever Mario is rendered holding an object, the game is just updating the HOLP to be right in front of Mario. And whenever you throw or drop an object, it throws and drops it relative to this HOLP. So the reason all of this is important is that when Mario is just walking around holding the object, and there's the HOLP updating, so the game knows where to throw the object. This isn't actually always the case that the HOLP is being updated to in front of Mario. So for example, I'm going to use STROOP here to make this easier to demonstrate. Okay, so the hat is so Mario's currently holding his hat. This is a glitch you can do, and I'm going to explain really quick. But you can see, when you're in this state and you grab the object, I think it's like Mario's holding his hat, and it's not rendering the object at all. Which means if I like go away from it and then press Z, the object will actually not be released at Mario. This is where I set the HOLP here in this save state a bit in the air just to make things easier to demonstrate, but yeah. You can bring the object around, you can throw it at the HOLP, and then it does whatever. The box is gonna break unless I get it. Nice, but yeah. This is really powerful because objects in general are just really useful for ABC. Partly clones, partly just bombs and just other objects are just really helpful. So being able to take a thrown object and release it in areas that you can't normally is really helpful. It's especially helpful given the fact that, okay, it's helpful in the fact that Mario's movement options while holding an object are like super limited. So being able to drop or throw something at the HOLP, and then Mario can use rollouts and stuff to actually get over there. That's helpful. Another helpful property of the HOLP is that it works between levels. So if you've ever seen an IL of the A button challenge, and it starts in a level that's not actually the one that the star is in. Like, RTABC, it does it at Big Boo's Merry-Go-Round does it. Bowser and the Fire Sea with reds in 1A press does it. There's a lot of stars which, you know, they don't even start the level in the actual star. So, like, what's up with that? The reason is because whenever Mario exits a course or enters a new course, the HOLP doesn't update. It can, as far as I'm aware, after the game initializes the HOLP once, when you boot up the console, and it sets the HOLP to 000, just an X, Y, and Z. The only thing that ever updates the HOLP is Mario holding an object and being rendered holding the object. Nothing else ever updates the HOLP, so yeah. You can, for example, set the HOLP in one level, and then when you go to a different level, if you find a way to throw or release an object at the HOLP without updating it yourself, then you can take an object to somewhere maybe even Mario could never have even gotten. So yeah, it's really useful for that type of stuff. So yeah, main question. Okay, one more thing I do want to note about the HOLP is that the difference between throwing something at the HOLP and releasing something at the HOLP. So when Mario has an object and he's getting rid of it, there's two main methods you can use. One is by pressing Z, one is by pressing the B button, and that does a throw. So, you know, he throws the object, and when that happens, the object will appear exactly at the HOLP. However, there's another way to drop the object, which you can either do by pressing B or, like most ways of dropping the object, other than throwing it with B, count as dropping it. What that'll do is that it'll release the object at Mario's actual height, and it uses the HOLP for the horizontal coordinates. And for reference, the game uses X, Y, Z coordinate axes. The Y axis is vertical, X and Z are the horizontal ones. So, just gonna clarify that. So, for example, if I take this box and I jump and press Z, it'll appear in the air. Whereas if I'm just on the ground and I press Z, the bubbles make this complicated. If you're on the ground and press Z, it'll just appear on the ground. Whereas if you throw the cork box, it'll just get thrown wherever you set the HOLP. So yeah. That's a good thing to note. It also has to do with HOLP setups. So generally when you're doing a setup for the HOLP, if you are throwing the object and you're trying to set up the HOLP, you need to care about both the height and the XYZ coordinates, which for a lot of strats makes the exact HOLP you need kind of difficult to get. See Scale the Mountain and the Womp's Fortress HOLP for a lot of TikTok clock. Those HOLPs are kind of hard to get because your exact X and Z and Y position matters. Whereas there are some HOLPs where, because you're going to be dropping the object at Mario's height, when you're originally setting it, you only care about Mario's X and Z position. So in those cases, the HOLPs are a lot easier to set up. See Merry-Go-Round and I'm struggling on other ones, but yeah. It's useful, yeah. So just keep that in mind. If you're doing a strat that needs a preset HOLP, keep a lookout for whether you're throwing the object or dropping the object, and that says a lot about what exact HOLPs you can get. So the only thing I really need to talk about the HOLP then is how do we get into a state where we can grab and release objects and move around with them without actually updating the HOLP. So, at least RTA, there's sort of three main methods. Of doing it. One is the hat and hand glitch, which is what you've seen. It's sort of the most powerful, but it's also there's not a ton of spots where you can do it. The other two are instant release and behind camera anywhere. For tasks, for tool-assisted speedruns, you'd include a fourth option of pause buffer hit stun, but that's not going to be doable RTA. So, just going to talk about these three. So the first one, and sort of the easiest / most generous, is the hat and hand glitch, and it's what I've shown off. The way you activate it is, I'll try and show it off with this box here. So it's really good to do with power-up boxes. So first, you get hats that Mario picks up on the ground. And you can see when Mario picks up a hat and he just walks into the hat, he's not airborne, he'll do this little animation where he does this little pickup of the hat. If Mario is picking up a hat, and as soon as he's done picking up a hat, he can pick up another one, there will be a glitch where he'll be holding the hat in his hand and not actually on his head. So I'm going to demonstrate it here. So pick up the one hat, and then immediately pick up the other. And yeah, he won't do the animation, and he'll just keep the hat he just picked up in his hand. So yeah. And yeah, this, as previously shown off, lets you pick up and release objects at the HOLP without updating it yourself. It's really easily, so the scenario you need to do it, the most common way you do it is you do a little dive like that. To do it like this with the warp box, you could do it basically anywhere where Mario is able to open a power-up box, a cat box, 0xa, and it'll be next to a slope or a wall to sort of stop the other cat from going. So you can see this cat, it goes towards the slope and then it disappears. So if I try to do it without pressing A, yeah. Roll out into the box, stay on the ground, pick up the hat, and then you pick up... Oh, that wasn't quite good enough. Yeah, I think the problem here is... Yeah, there it worked. I don't really know why that one worked and the other one didn't. But yeah, that's what it looks like. The thing you need... It's kind of hard to get the timing for the dive rollout correct, but yeah. It's a thing you need to practice. This particular spot is a really good place to do it, but it's also doable in BBH, Shifting Sandland, and a few other places. Yeah. You do need a wall or a slope to be able to do it. Because if you don't, like, I just opened the box this way, and I don't know if people know this, but when you open a cat box, the cap is going to go slightly in the direction that Mario was facing when he opened the box. So I was facing this way, the cap went this way, as opposed to when I was facing towards the slope and it opened towards the slope. But you could see, like, there's no way I could have gotten the caps close enough to each other to be able to do this. So yeah, you need a slope or wall in order to be able to do it. But yeah, power-up boxes. Oh, you also don't have to worry about the fact that this is a wing cap, because when a wing cap runs out, yeah, it just turns into Mario's hat, no biggie. To get rid of the hat in hand state, you either collect another hat, in which case it'll work, or you can use a warp. And warp will... That's not the flower bed where the warp is. If you use a warp, it gets rid of it. Speaking of warps, that leads to the second method of doing hat in hand. I don't really have a save state or demonstration for this, but it's useful in Snowman's Land, TTM, and Shifting Sandland, although you can't grab anything in Snowman's Land, so it's really only useful in TTM and Shifting Sandland. And Shifting Sandland it's mostly used in Tall Tall Mountain. But yeah, what happens is that if you have the hat, and you just lose it by Klepto or the wind or the snowman in SL, it falls on the ground. If you then use the warp with the hat on the ground, using the warp actually duplicates the hat on the ground. Like, as you go back and forth, more and more hats will appear. And then from that, you can go back to the pile. There'll just be a giant pile of hats. And when you walk into them, Mario will pick up the first one, and then he'll just pick up all the other ones. And he'll get hat in hand that way. Yeah. Good. Yeah, that's sort of hat in hand glitch and how you activate it. Yeah. You do it really easily in STROOP by just going to the hat on... You go to Mario, go to the hat on head and hat in hand buttons, and then you just hit both of them. So, yeah. The main thing that is good about hat in hand as opposed to other methods of grabbing and releasing objects is it's the only one you can really use and be able to have Mario like move around. The other two require Mario being much more stationary in order to really work. Another thing which is unfortunate about hat in hand, let me get it real quick. So if you have hat in hand and you're trying to clone an object, it's going to be difficult, because you can see I try to grab the Bob-omb, and normally what happened before is that the Bob-omb would drop in front of me and then I could pick it up, but because I'm not updating the HOLP, the bomb isn't going to be dropped here, it's going to be dropped, it's dropped over there. You can't really use it like that, so you kind of have to time it a little bit. Like, let me try and get a good demonstration. Okay, that didn't work. Let me get another demonstration. But yeah, another disadvantage of hat in hand when you combine with cloning, because when done with cloning, it's really powerful. Is come on. Okay. So I've grabbed the Bon Fake with hat in hand. Is that because with the coin, we just walked around until the coin loaded into Mario's hand. But because the object isn't rendering in Mario's hands, you don't really know what object you're holding. Like, you know, here, maybe I just loaded one of the 3 Goombas. Maybe not. You can't really tell just by looking at Mario. The solution for this is basically everywhere where you need to do hat-in-hand cloning, like TTM or BOB. There will be a setup that someone will provide for you where you can actually consistently get, like, for example, one of those 3 Goombas. And, yeah. So, yeah. That's going to be a thing. In order to actually come up with a setup yourselves, I'm not going to talk about how you do that in this tutorial, because it's really jank. But it can be... A consistent setup can be done. So, yeah. That's... Oh. Another thing I wanted to talk about with cloning in hat in hand is... this one's kind of obscure, so I'm not going to talk about too much, is a glitch called transport cloning. So, first thing let me actually hack Mario so that he's actually holding a Goomba. Wait, I am holding a Goomba, apparently? Oh, I was actually holding a Goomba. I don't really know what happened. Maybe, oh, I know, I probably did something different. So the HOLP, for example, is all the way on that end of the level. And if I release one of the Goombas, you can see we go all the way back. The Goomba's over here. Yeah. And this is also, by the way, the solution to how when you just punch and throw release a Goomba, you can release it without hitting the Goomba. That's the way you usually do it. But another sort of variation on cloning has to do with the object you're cloning if it's colliding with something else. Like, there I got the Goomba to collide with all 3 other Goombas, which is actually extremely rare. Usually you just do it with 2 of the other ones. But you can see the Goomba I placed is actually... The Goomba I placed is here, and then the other 2 Goombas, you know, they're both, like, all the way over there. So, like, what happened there? The idea with transport cloning is when you throw a Goomba and it's you could do it with other things, but it's pretty much always just going to be Goombas with Goombas. Because of the process of the Goomba interacting with other enemies, I'm not going to go into the detail, but basically it will go halfway between Mario and the HOLP. The Goomba will actually be placed at the HOLP. It'll be at the HOLP vertically in the Y direction. But yeah, its horizontal position is going to be exactly between Mario and the HOLP. So, you know, I was over here, the HOLP was over there near that rock, so the Goomba ended up over here. Here it was slightly different because I managed to somehow get 3 Goombas just completely on accident. So there it did it twice in the sense that it first put the Goomba halfway, and then it did it halfway again because it was working with 2 other Goombas. But yeah. Kind of an obscure technique, but I feel like I should mention it here because it's kind of cool. Yeah, that's it. So about that, the two other methods for updating the HOLP are usually only done with moving Bob-ombs around, because Bob-ombs are really powerful enemies. The other 2 methods, instant release and behind camera anywhere, you can't really move around with them, which makes them a lot more difficult to clone, because you can't really do a setup or anything if you're just standing still. But I will go over. The first one, because they're both important. The first one is called instant release. It has to do with what happens when Mario dives and picks up an object. And I don't know if it's the same frame or 1 frame later, but he picks up the object, and then, like, the very next instant he bonks into a wall and drops the object. And what that does is that since Mario is dropping the object so quickly, because he's diving into a wall, so he's dropping the object from bonking, he drops it so quickly that the game doesn't actually ever render the object in front of Mario. So the HOLP won't update, and therefore the object won't be released at Mario. So this one's kind of inconsistent, but I got it there. Yeah. So you can see the Bob-omb, nowhere to be seen. We go over here. Yeah. Then the bomb. Then you can reactivate the bomb later. So yeah, it's kind of inconsistent to do because you need to get just the right position and angle. I tend to err on if you're doing it with a Bob-omb. I don't really know of any scenarios where you wouldn't do it with a Bob-omb. But if you're doing it, what I advise is wait for the Bob-omb to be walking towards the direction Mario is running. Like, this Bob-omb, as I run towards it, is going towards the left. So I want to dive into it from the left. Often, you want to add a little bit of an angle and a little bit to the left of the Bob-omb. So that time it didn't really work. Let me try and get another. Yeah, there it worked. You want to be a little bit to the one side of the Bob-omb, at a little bit of an angle, as for my understanding. And you want the Bob-omb to be working towards you. If you do all that, gives you sort of, at least to my knowledge, the best odds of getting it. And if you are trying to get it, you should err on the side of being too far away from the Bob-omb so that you don't ever pick it up. Because if you do an attempt where... I can't believe that worked. I just kind of YOLO'd that one. If you do an attempt where you miss the Bob-omb, the HOLP still isn't updated. You could just try it again. Whereas if you do it too far to the right and you end up picking up the object for a couple frames, then the HOLP's going to be updated to right in front of Mario, so it's like, it ruins the HOLP, if that's what you were trying to do. So yeah. Err on the side of not picking up the Bob-omb so you can retry it. So yeah. And also for reference about a weird behavior Bob-omb that makes it possible to do this, I don't know how people... I didn't realize this until kind of recently, and it kind of surprised me. So normally if a Bob-omb hasn't noticed you, it's just going to be walking around in a circle. If you walk like within the circle that the Bob-omb is rotating around, specifically too close to like the home of the Bob-omb, it's just going to walk straight in a line, and it's like never going to stop. Like if I speed up the emulator, like... Okay, well here it's... I think it might be because there's 2 walls, but yeah, it's just going to keep walking like forever. Until you leave the home. And actually, until the Bob-omb gets close enough to their home, they're not going to notice you. Like, doesn't notice me. They're not getting triggered or whatever. And then the Bob-omb got close enough, and then it got mad at me and started trying to go after me. Yeah. For reference, that's usually how you get a bomb close enough to a wall so you can actually do instant release. So yeah. That's instant release. It's mostly done with Bob-ombs to get them higher up in the level. And there's a reason why Bob-ombs are particularly useful for this kind of thing. I'll try and explain later. Yeah. Last up is the third and by far most recent method of throwing and holding an object without updating the HOLP is behind camera anywhere. So the idea is, for this one, is... the HOLP only is updating when Mario is on screen, rendered, showing the object. Not so much on screen. But when Mario is being rendered holding the object, that is the only time the HOLP is being updated. So the idea for this one is, if you can just get Mario far enough behind the camera so that the camera isn't looking at Mario at all, then the HOLP won't update. And it's not just like Mario can't be on screen, because if like, oh no, like you like keep the camera up here, Mario's down here, it'll still be updating the HOLP. The idea is that you need Mario to actually be behind the camera enough that the camera doesn't want to render him at all. Well, this one's sort of the most jank, and it might take me a few tries to demonstrate here, but I'll try it out with this cork box. This method only really works if the object you're holding is going to be standing still in some capacity. Otherwise, it's like extremely hard. The way I do it, it relies on fixed cam, and actually all methods of behind camera anywhere, or BCA for short, use fixed cam. Well, I do it, stand a little bit, like diagonal a bit from the thing you're trying to throw. You go into first person. You then activate fixed cam, and you keep the camera like this. Then you go over towards the object, and you try to have Mario face towards the camera. And then from here, you could sort of jiggle the C left and C right camera buttons a little bit. And ideally what will happen is the camera will then just fling around. Like it was looking at Mario, it's now looking the direction Mario's facing. So if I've done this correct, Mario is far enough behind the camera that the game isn't updating him. So let me try. Yeah, you can see I was behind the camera, the HOLP didn't update, and now the box is over here. And I didn't have to do anything special. Didn't need hat in hand or anything. I could just stand right there, do this little setup, and the box is away. It can be kind of jank, because there's a lot of times where it kind of looks like that Mario isn't on camera, but he's still technically being rendered, so this isn't going to work. My advice for this is, when you joggle the camera buttons, I don't know how rigorous this is, but like you can see, this is a case where the camera isn't really turning around. My general advice is the slower the camera wants to turn around, the less likely it is for the BCA to actually work. Like it can point all the way around, like there you go. And like here it'll work. Well, there I just didn't throw the object, but like, let me try and get an example where it doesn't work. If I'm like here, there it didn't fling around super fast, so let me try it. Okay, it still worked. Yeah, for reference, yeah, I don't know. It can be kind of confusing. I don't really fully understand it, but that's sort of a method you can do where if you have a in-place object, you can release it at the HOLP without actually picking it up. Just by being behind the camera, the only thing you need is that the object needs to be standing still. Here I use the cork box. Usually what people do is it's still with a Bob-omb, but you get the Bob-omb in such a state that they're not, the Bob-omb's not moving. They're just like walking in place. Yeah. Those are the three main methods of releasing an object without the HOLP. Alright, yeah. So I'm going to try and speed run through the rest of these. So, alright. First up is just, yeah, that was all the cloning and HOLP stuff. Took by far the longest to explain. The rest of these aren't nearly as weird, so I can go through them really quickly. First thing I want to talk about is more properties about bombs. So when you take a bomb and you release it at the HOLP, if the bomb is released out of bounds, it'll do something different between most objects. So for most objects, if you release them out of bounds, they're just going to stay out of bounds and you can't really access them. Whereas if you place the bomb out of bounds, and out of bounds means in a location without any floors beneath it. So like underneath this hill would be out of bounds. If you release a bomb there, then whenever you get close enough to the bomb, like 4,000 units away, which is like 4,000 units is a pretty big distant radius. It's like a quarter of the length of all of Bob, so it's kind of big. As soon as you do that, the bomb is just going to teleport directly to Mario, and you can use that for things like TTC, and it's also why when I was instant releasing this Bob-omb, I would walk a little bit to the left, and then the Bob-omb would just appear in front of me. So, yeah. That's the idea. Another thing about them is that if you have a bomb, and this is probably more obvious if you speedrun the game, but if you have a bomb, and if you punch it early enough before it's cloned, you can actually grab the Bob-omb while it's bloated. And the Bob-omb is, again, an exception to the fact where when you grab an object, it doesn't move. So here, the Bob-omb is actually both huge, it actually is large, and it's actually being placed in front of Mario. The bomb is placed in front of Mario, actually, because so can make the smoke particles. Yeah, you can move fast with it. You can also re-grab it if you can keep it up. It's kind of hard to do it very frequently, but yeah. That's another thing to note about them, and yeah, alright. No more HOLP stuff for the rest of it. No more HOLP, no more cloning. First thing I want to point out is vertical speed conservation, which I have another save state to help demonstrate. So vertical speed conservation is a really useful method for just getting Mario to have a lot more height, just based off of usually leveled geometry. So the idea behind vertical speed conservation is Mario's speed when he's going up and down is just handled completely separately from his horizontal speed. Like, it's just completely separately handled. And it's always... Just because Mario isn't moving vertically doesn't mean his vertical speed isn't being updated. So, for example, I ground pounded on this platform. Ground pound makes Mario move really fast down. So I'm on the ground right now. So you might think Mario's vertical speed is 0 because he's not moving up or down. But actually, because Mario's in a grounded state, the game is... He still has his negative vertical speed, but he's not being moved. Which means that if you can fall off a platform with VS without updating Mario's vertical speed that he has stored, let me get this groove out of the way, then when you become airborne again, you actually keep the vertical speed. So for example, I just run off this platform, kind of glide down at the start. If I punch my way off this platform, I rocket down super quick. And yeah, punching is an action that doesn't update your vertical speed, which is useful because a lot of actions, such as running around actually does just set Mario's vertical speed to 0. Yes, if you just get your vertical speed somehow on the ground, you can just punch forward, and you don't walk or do anything. Then when you become airborne again, you will get the vertical speed you have. The reason this is so useful is because there are scenarios where you can land on the ground with positive, aka upward, vertical speed. And this means when you become airborne again, you'll do a little bit of a thing up. So in this save state, I have vertical speed. So if I jump off, Mario's now moving upward. And not only that, he's moving upward and he's in free fall, which means he can either ledge grab platforms or he can ground pound. Ground pounding there gives enough height. Ground pounding with VSC there gives enough height to get that coin, because you can't do a rollout into it normally. So yeah, it's useful in a lot of stages. It's really useful in Rainbow Ride and Big Boo's Haunt. To just ledge grab up platforms. Here it's used to get into free fall. For the main question right now, you can conserve the vertical speed easily by just punching. Main disadvantage of the fact that you can only do it with punching is that you can't change your angle. So that whatever angle Mario is facing when he starts punching and has vertical speed stored, that you can't change that. You just gotta keep punching forward effectively. Or the platform beneath you can run out. That's also possible, but yeah. If you do that, you'll become airborne, and you will have conserved your vertical speed, aka then vertical speed conservation. So the tricky part about vertical speed conservation is how do you land on a platform with positive or upward vertical speed? Because you think if you're landing on a platform with vertical speed that's positive, you have to be moving up onto the platform, and it's kind of hard to do that. Usually when you land on a platform, you're moving down onto it. So there's sort of 3 or 4 main ways of doing it. The first one, and it's the one that's used here, is you're on a really steep slope like this, which means that if you do a rollout on the slope, it's so steep that it just snaps Mario onto the floor as soon as he does the rollout. So yeah, I have vertical speed here right now. My angle's too trash to go forward, but yeah, I have vertical speed stored there. Second way of doing it is if you have, this is the one used in BBH and Rainbow Ride, if you have a rising platform, and it's rising up quick enough, it has the same sort of property where you do a rollout, and instead of Mario being in the air, the platform's moving up enough that it actually just stops Mario immediately. And that's another way you can land on a platform with positive vertical speed. Another way of doing it is if you roll out onto another floor, and you either roll out onto a floor that doesn't have any walls around it, so you can just roll out up into it, and that one's also used in Rainbow Ride, or you roll out just barely onto a floor. You roll out onto a floor where you sort of just barely clip onto it. Like signs are kind of a good place to do it. I suck at doing them on signs, but signs are like the right height to do it. If you perfectly get on the sign, and you hold neutral, because if you hold neutral when you roll out from trying to get DSC, then you're going to end up moving. Okay, so this might work. Let's see. Okay. It wasn't really obvious. But that's the third way of doing it. It's pretty jank. It's mostly used for things like the Rainbow Ride carpets, because they're just floors without any walls around them. And yeah, that allows you to get onto the floor while moving upwards. So yeah, that's the detail of it. It's a good way from a rollout. You could get a little bit of height and be able to... You could get the height from a rollout and also be able to ledge grab or ground pound. So it's useful for that. And that's all I'm going to really talk about vertical speed conservation. Next one is... and it's only ever really used in HMC, but I feel like I should talk about it, is horizontal speed conservation. It basically comes from the fact that when Mario does certain actions, like enter the water or grabbing onto a pole, ignore how I got all this speed. I'm pretty sure, depending on the videos you've watched, you know how I got some speed there. Yeah, the idea is if you're in a pole or you're in water, there's sort of a hidden speed variable distinct from Mario's normal speed called his sliding speed. And when you exit sliding or exit a pole, and you press Z immediately, and this is a frame perfect trick, because you need to press Z as soon as you hit the ground effectively, then Mario will start sliding, and because his sliding speed is really big, then he'll actually exit the water with a ton of speed. So I'll try and show it off here. It's kind of hard to demonstrate because you gotta press Z literally frame perfectly. Yeah, this works. You can see I had a ton of speed and just jolted forward onto this area. So yeah, it's useful for that. Depending on the type of horizontal speed conservation you're doing, you also need to press both Z and C up at the same time. That's pretty much only used if Mario's not going airborne. So if he's trying to do speed conservation, but he's going to be on the ground for like an extended period of time, then you'll also want to do C up, so Mario doesn't lose a lot of speed. Because by default, Mario will just be crouch sliding, and crouch sliding loses a lot of speed really quickly. Whereas if you're in C up, you do a C up slide, and that doesn't cause you to lose so much speed. That's pretty much all I'm going to talk about it, because it's only really used in HMC. I feel like I should mention it. Next thing to mention is Star Dance Clip. This has to do with the fact that, okay, when Mario is collecting a star, he'll be in this animation where he's collecting the star, he's falling to the ground, and then once he hits the ground, he does the dance, and then the music goes da 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 da. However, when Mario's in that state where he's collected the star, he actually has a flag set for being able to ledge grab. So for example, here, I've spawned the 100 coin star. Well, the 100 coin star is good because when you collect it, it won't kick you out of the level, and you could spawn it in a ton of places. The idea is if I do a rollout here, I actually ledge grab up on this platform despite being in the star grab state. And it's useful for getting height again because it's a rollout that you can ledge grab out of. Like you can't normally get out of this gap. But with the star dance flip you can. So yeah, just another way of getting a lot of height. You can do it with both the 100 coin star or for entering Hazy Maze Cave. You can also do it with the MIP star. It's kind of more complicated, but yeah. 100 coin star, MIP star. If you spawn them in the right spot, you can do a rollout and ledge grab up, and that's really useful. Last thing to talk about that's sort of really useful is misalignments. So misalignments it's another trick where you can sort of get extra height from doing usually a rollout. In this case, it comes about by abusing the process the game uses to check for floor and wall collision. So, for example, this vanish cap switch. First thing to note about it is it looks like a hexagon. It actually isn't. The base of the hexagon and the top of the switch, they're just cubes. Like, for example, if I press the switch... First thing to note about it is it's just a cube. Like, you could go way off the corner. Yeah. So, yeah. You can see that the level geometry doesn't actually match up with the visuals. So, yeah. Both the base of the switch and the top of the switch are just cubes. And there's a nifty property with the four corners of this cube. For the corner of it that's facing away from the origin, like the origin of the course at 0, 0, 0 is like somewhere over here. I don't really know. For corners that are facing away from the origin because of wall technical game shenaniganry, there will be an exactly 1x1 unit square where Mario can interact with the floor of the switch without having to interact with either of the walls. And the reason this is helpful is because floors will actually snap Mario up onto it. Like, if Mario's a little bit beneath the floor, he will actually be snapped up to the floor. The problem is that you can't normally get beneath the floor because there's walls surrounding it. So with a misalignment, if you enter that 1x1 unit area, then you can actually trigger getting clipped up onto the floor. And it's really precise. Like, 1x1 unit, it's extremely annoying to precise to get into it. So for example, this is Mario at 1 position. That is Mario 1 unit to the right. That is Mario at the original position. That's him 1 unit to the left from when we started. And that's him 1 unit to the right. So it's really, really precise. Yeah. And it's made even worse by the fact that you not only have to be really precise in one direction, you have to also be really precise in the other direction from a rollout where you're moving. So it's hard to be really precise. But yeah. So they're really precise. They're used all the time in TASs, but RTA, you only really use them if you can. So, but this Vanish Cap switch is the only sort of easy one. The only actually not super frustrating one to press. There's a setup for it. I'll try and demonstrate it here. So the reason you could get a setup for this one is because there's a ton of... It's because of the specific level geometry here. Lets you... Hold on. You could run into the corner like this. And let me try and show off getting into the misalignment. So if you're in this state and then you dive, So yeah, right now, I'm currently floating. Well, I'm on the floor of the base of the switch, and normally you can't stand on just the base of the switch because you're going to get messed up by the walls of the two sides of the switch. But here I've landed in the 1x1 unit area where I'm not interacting with the walls at all. And if I just jump straight up from here, I just land on the floor immediately. So that should show that I'm both beneath the floor but not interacting with the two walls next to it. Otherwise I would have gotten pushed off. So yeah. And to actually press the switch, it's a little bit more janky. Yeah. And then you can use that misalignment to press the switch, which is really nice because you cannot roll out into the switch normally. That's misalignments. They're used in a few other spots like Dark World Pipe, entering Bowser in the sky. They're only really used RTA in spots where you can retry them. Because if there's ever a scenario where you have to get a misalignment, like first try, unless it's like right at the start of a course or something, good luck. Just because it's so precise. But it can be done with enough tries and enough patience. So, yeah. That's that about misalignment. Yeah. Oh, I should reiterate. So misalignments only exist generally on one corner of something. So this switch, which is made up of, its footprint is a square with 4 corners. Only this corner in the back has it because it's facing away from the origin. So I need to point that out. So like if you're seeing someone doing the Bowser in the Dark World pipe and you're trying to get the misalignment into it or something, keep in mind which corner you're doing it on, because if you're doing it on the wrong corner, it's just going to straight up not be possible. And you'll be doing a bunch of attempts for nothing. So yeah, that's pretty much it. The only things I want to touch about briefly at the end are sort of faster movement options. First one being a punch cancel. So when Mario's from a standstill and you want Mario to start moving, you just hold the joystick and then he starts to run. Oh, you can also, if you do a punch and you start moving, what happens is that you punch and then you start holding the joystick immediately after to interrupt the punch. Because the punch gives Mario a little bit of acceleration, this can sometimes, if you do it really well, it can be faster than just by walking forward from a standstill. Normally, in actual RTA, it's literally like you have to be frame perfect, and if you do, it saves 1 frame. I'm not sure if in RTABC it's that pointless, or if it's, wow, that was a great coincidence. I'm not sure if in RTABC it's that pointless, or if you can do it a little bit more and it still works. But yeah, some people do it more, some people don't. You will never have to do it unless you're doing like an IL or something, and you're doing an extremely short IL and you want to squeeze out all of the frames. But yeah, feel like I should mention it because some people do it, and you want to know what they're doing. Last thing, it's technically relevant once. It's super relevant. It's called Divegrinding. It's super relevant for TAS, especially going fast. RTA, it's not really consistent enough to do. The idea of it is when you're going along a platform, if you're parallel enough with the platform and you dive, you can dive off the platform and then stay on the platforms and continue. So let me look. Here's a good place to do it. So you walk forward, you dive, and I messed it up because I wasn't quite parallel enough to the slope, but yeah, there you go. TAS does that all the time. You could spam it like over and over again, and you can accelerate from a standstill really quickly, provided you're at the edge of the platform. RTA, it's used a couple times. It's used once in Rainbow Ride, and it's used in the 0 A press strat for Fall into the Caged Island as opposed to the half A press strat. So it's not used super often, but, you know, be aware of it. And that's pretty much everything I wanted to talk about. But yeah, this one, a bit longer than the last one. I really wanted these 2 tutorials to be shorter, but I couldn't really come up with a way to do it faster without just scripting absolutely everything. So yeah, thank you for watching all the way to the end, if anyone is ever going to watch all the way to the end on this. It's really long and tedious. And most people that normally watch my RTABC stuff know a lot of this already, so if you have watched it, thank you for watching. Yeah, next up should be the stage tutorials, which I imagine will be a lot more directly helpful. Thanks for watching.